I think it was John Kennedy who said that the oceans are the salt in our veins, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. As somebody born and raised in Monterey, you can't live in this area and not feel the spirit of the ocean. That's important to our livelihood, it's important to our recreation, it's important to the beauty of this area.
There's an openness in the West, both the landscapes and what you see, certainly along the coast, just the wide open spaces I think are really powerful. And I think a lot of people that you find in coastal California and central California here in Monterey, they see this place that just gets in them and they don't want to leave, or if they leave, they don't leave for long.
When I got elected to Congress, there was a Secretary of Interior who decided that all coastal areas would be put up for sale to the highest bidder for offshore drilling. And I was very concerned about that, and actually went to see the Secretary along with some other members of Congress to try to convince him that there are some areas that ought to be protected, that are national treasures, like a Yosemite and Yellowstone, and that ought to be protected from offshore drilling. He did not accept that argument. I drafted legislation at the time to try to prevent any funding from proceeding, and that moratorium ultimately was passed by the Congress. I was worried about whether or not, when oil prices went up, whether we would be able to retain that moratorium. So I moved separate legislation to establish Monterey Bay as a national marine sanctuary and got it passed through the Congress. And now we have permanent protection in this area. It's probably one of my proudest achievements.
The Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary begins at the shoreline, extends out around 50 miles offshore from San Francisco and north in Marin County down to, along the Big Sur coast, down to Cambria. So it's around 6,000 square miles. It's bigger than 4 or 5 states in the United States, a huge ocean area. Part of what makes this area rich ecologically is this submarine canyon that comes right up to shore at Moss Landing that stretches out through the heart of Monterey Bay. It's comparable in size and depth and width to the Grand Canyon. The fact that there's very deep cold water near shore here, where the wind, like we're getting today, that blows along the coast, drives a pattern of oceanographic upwelling that pulls nutrients from the deep water. And those nutrients create a real active food web that starts with very small organisms up until you get to the blue whales. And so the geology creates the biology, and the biology feeds off the oceanographic patterns that we get in this area because of these submarine features. When we manage a national marine sanctuary, we're managing the people and the people that use it, so that the environment can sustain the multiple uses that we have in this area. And then coastal recreation and tourism is, in some ways, depending on how you measure it, maybe $1 billion a year are spent on coastal tourism. And the health of the ocean, the availability of wildlife for people to see and seabirds is a really important draw to bring people to these areas. It is probably the best place on earth to see marine wildlife. You get the Serengeti on the sea here. There are 6 or 7 species of whales. There's some of the best scuba diving in the world. The largest kelp forest assemblage is here along the Central Coast. There's fish to be caught, harbor seals. The loud vocal ones you see in the harbor and also along the trail are California sea lions. There's the enigmatic sea otter that's very playful in the shoreline and in the coast.
They've been a very important part of what attracts people to the beauty of our oceans. Probably their cuteness is what has protected them more than anything, because you take one look at these animals and there's something to be said about lying on your back in the ocean and eating crab.
People get charged up when they come to the coast and they see it. You can tell walking along the coastal trail when someone's from out of town and they're amazed and trying to figure out, what is that animal there? Look at that animal right there on the rocks. As marine resource managers here in Monterey, we're blessed by having a marine sanctuary that's very productive, important ecological area come right to shore. And we've got a trail that runs along the heart of Monterey Bay, as well as up through Santa Cruz and into San Mateo County. And people can walk along that trail and see the wildlife that they might have learned about at the aquarium. They can see it for real in the shoreline here in this area. There are other special places of coast in America, but many of them you may not be able to move along the coast or get down to the shoreline. So the coastal trail is critical, and that's a really powerful mechanism for the public to connect with the wildlife and how they could be part of this whole ecological ecosystem here by exploring it from the shoreline.
This is our legacy to the future, our ability to protect the beauty of our coastline, the beauty of our oceans. This is something we owe our children, that they're able to enjoy what we enjoy today.
No one's going to want to come to visit a country, a county, a city that's got polluted beaches. And so having a healthy marine environment is really important to people.
But the reality is that our oceans are critical to life itself, to not only our nutrition, to the economics of those that depend on the ocean, to tourism, to recreation, and most of all our spirit. And I think for that reason, we ought to treat it very responsibly, because if we ever damage that resource, I think we'll damage life itself.